it's very annoying that it's 2 clicks to go live. You think, press live, you want to go live, but
Does it ask you and make sure that
yeah,
you
it says, are you sure you want to go live? So, but I think we're almost definitely
Are you
live.
wearing clothes?
Yeah, we've got one comment so far. I think it's going to be a quiet night on the audience.
I suspect it might be. I think there's some. Is it dressage on today or something?
Yeah, or there's some probably people celebrating the tennis, maybe. There was Wimbledon final today.
Is that the one with the long wooden bats?
Yeah, not sure.
I think what it is, it's episode 007, so it's a secret table. No one knows about this now.
Yes, yeah,
of course,
yeah. I did wonder about trying to do a kind of up the
secret
thumbnail based around sort of maybe the rifling.
Yeah.
But 5 seconds later, I thought I can't do that. Actually, actually, I probably could, but it'd just take longer than the time I've had available this weekend.
So would that make you M then? And I'd probably have to be Q, I think. If Kurt's going to be Bond.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm old enough to be M. Yeah, I think that would be.
To be honest,
Dead ringer for Judi Dench as well.
Well, this is it. Yeah. Or I could be P.
Yeah. I think at this point,
that's probably not good. That's probably not a good one. That's probably not a good one to be, is it? Yeah. I'm P. Yeah, rather than Q. You've got to mind your P's and Q's, haven't you?
Well, very true.
Yeah, we've already
welcome.
Yeah. Face is hurting again already. It's
a good start.
Yeah, welcome, Kurt. For the benefit of those listening in, our guest this evening is Kurt Borg from Malta, from the Corso Workshop, as on Instagram and YouTube. And we met in 2019 for Maker Central, didn't we?
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much for having me. Yeah. I'm really excited to be here. Yes, we did meet in Maker Central 2018. We might have met in 2018. We might have met because I didn't make it to 2018. Oh, then must have been 2019.
We bumped into each other and had a very brief natter, I believe, in 2018.
Oh yeah, very, very possible. I was so neurotic in 2018. I was out of my element. I can tell you the story of how I ended up there, but
yeah.
I mean,
do.
No, I mean, I always wanted to sort of go to these like maker fairs, and because we don't get them in Malta. Like the first maker fair was going to be held in 2020, and COVID happened, so we didn't have it. So in 2018, I was really excited, but I used to hate traveling alone and like meeting like new people. It's like way outside my comfort zone, ironically nowadays. So I went there, was so neurotic in 2018. So I met a bunch of people I don't remember. And I spent most of my time alone there. I didn't know people were hanging out in the lobby. So then,
that's the same.
On Sunday morning, Saturday I met Bob Claggett and his wife, brilliant people, and then on Sunday I met them again, and they told us, "Listen, you want to come over to the lobby where everyone's hanging there in the evening?" I said, "Yeah, sure, I go." I thought it was going to be like a couple of people, and I go there, and I'm like surrounded with all these YouTubers, like millions of views, and I'm like, they're like frozen. You can see me actually frozen in Laura Combs' background. Like I'm holding a beer in hand, like just impressed. So then 2019 came over and I said, you know what, forget the neurotic. I'm going to be friends with everyone. I spoke to everyone, met Andy, great people, everyone. So yeah, that's how that's basically
absolutely the way to do it.
Yeah,
it's surprising how many of our friends have said the same thing, that like when they came over, they were, you know, paranoid and neurotic, and then, you know, sort of either a couple of days in or by the next year, it was just walk in, arms wide, friends.
I think it's a common reaction. I think. I suspect that if a sort of psychological study of makers was done, that a significant proportion would be exhibiting a strong extreme introversion, a large amount of neurodiversion, as you say, and basically uncomfortable in crowds. but the thing I've always noticed about introvert, I mean, I can pretend to be an extrovert at times, but one of the things I've noticed about introverts is that once you get them together and they have something in common, they can be as excited and buoyant and energetic as extroverts.
There is a word for that, and I'm going to have to try and find the word now.
I can speak for myself when I say that. I'm not usually an introvert at all. I'm quite outgoing to people. I get along in crowds and that sort of thing. But with like Maker Center in particular, I was very introverted in 2018. But what really happened then was like I got into the community, I got this feeling of belonging, and I still can feel it to this day, even though like 2 years have passed since 2019. And it's that feeling of belonging to the makers community that when I went home, I was like, that community I belong to, I won't be able to see them for another year, 2 years, but 3 years, but yeah.
Well, now we've all shifted to online video chats and stuff and hanging out that way. Parallel play is the phrase I was thinking of for where you've got people who can interact with their own thoughts and stuff that they're doing, but in the same kind of room. So a group of makers together will all be quite happily doing their own makery thing, but just kind of next to someone like them without actually needing to interact so much.
Yeah, and that links to things like the UK Men's Shed, or the International Men's Shed organisation. They kind of set up to support men, particularly those who perhaps are older, perhaps widowed, perhaps they've retired, they've lost their kind of purpose in life. And they kind of do that by standing shoulder to shoulder over kind of a workbench. And you do that, and then you get to talk and discuss things and help each other that way. But I think often with introverts, it's there as well, isn't it? It's that idea that you can get on well with people that share similar passions. I think I mean, Kurt, you hit a nail on the head there talking about sort of the maker community, because I mean, like any community, I think there are sometimes people fall out, people maybe are fine together for a little while, but then somebody says something or does something, just like it's like a school playground, really.
It's any
but I think it can be,
isn't it?
yes. But I think certainly in my experience of a multitude of communities over my kind of 50 years, I think the maker community is probably one of the strongest communities I've been in, that is so supportive on such a large scale.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I agree. And in fact, I mean, even just making friends, friends that I didn't know them back then, but I was hanging out with people in 2019, like just having a beer, having a drink with them, and just having a chat. I mean, first of all, like you make like good memories and like some crazy stories, with, like, Walton Make, James,
Everyone's got James' story.
Yeah. It's like
for the benefit of those who perhaps are listening new, who are not familiar with James from Molten Make, who will at some point be a guest. He's not been formally invited yet, but he's definitely on the list of people to invite.
I don't think he needs an invite. We'll just grab his wrist and drag him.
The clue. Well, we have to fit in with his shifts, don't we? Because he does work shifts. He is obviously, by the name of his sort of channel, he is somebody who likes making, but he also likes making beer. And he's a very generous gentleman as well.
Very generous.
Baker
Central, he was very generous in the amount of beer that he brought with him and shared.
Well, I suppose if we're doing the backstory, we should point out that he made himself a rolling bar that was then stocked with a couple of types of beer that he'd made and a load of cold brew coffee that he'd also made, and was then just any familiar friendly face, he would offer them beer or coffee. And yeah, he's a wonderful man.
He had quite a lot of friends, I think.
Quite a lot, until he had to then move the bar, and then everyone disappeared for some reason.
Yes, we won't. In case anyone from the I won't mention hotel, but just in case anyone from the particular hotel that he was staying at is listening, we won't mention what he did with the bar in order to avoid sort of prohibition.
Yes,
All I can say that eventually it ended up with a password code and a special knock on the door. That's all.
The famous speakeasy.
Yeah, I mean, I was just standing around like having a chat, and then suddenly it's like someone tapping on my back. It was like Phil Elzebach, and he said, "Come with me." I'm like, "Okay, where are we going, man?" And said, "Just come with me. You seem to be like a nice guy." Let's go. I went to the place, and I was like, "Sorry, guys at midnight." I'm like, what? It was amazing though. No, I mean, great people, as I said, great memories, and it's just the community. It's just so inviting, so welcoming, and even beyond the social aspect, even if you're stuck in a dead end, or like we're making like a project and you don't know how to proceed, you always find people who give you good advice, and like from they will speak from experience, you know.
Yeah, it's such an inclusive and welcoming community. I think community is that one sort of word that seems to be quite divisive in anyone who's involved in it. But yeah, it just seems to be one of those things that no matter who or what you are, you sort of welcomed into the fold, as it were.
Yeah, it's true.
It's a good place to be, I think.
So what's the maker community like on Malta? I mean, you said there were plans. Yeah, there were plans for a maker fair for 2020. Obviously, that didn't happen in 2020. Is it going to happen this year, next year? Are there many makers? How they divert? I mean, there's so many questions just about that.
Okay,
fill us in.
I am not aware of a huge maker community. I know a couple of people who obviously make stuff. I have friends who like built their own CNCs, built their own 3D printers, like not got a kit and built it,
from scratch.
Yeah, they built it from scratch. I bought stuff like that. So there are enthusiasts. There is enough demand for a maker fair, sort of to justify making it, and it was going to be organized by a very prominent 3D printing company in Malta, and they're very involved in the community. They're very nice people, down-to-earth people. Obviously, I won't mention by name, but I mean, they were taking care of the whole organization. So I think it was going to be good. All I can say is I believe it was postponed. It wasn't cancelled, but till when, I am not quite sure. With regards to like what maker community is like, mostly my personal interactions, other than like little outliers, is mostly 3D printing and cosplay. For example, I know of only two other people who do leatherworking, for example, other than myself. In fact, I was trying to teach a younger person sort of how to get into the craft, that sort of thing, you know. I know of 2 blacksmiths in Malta. One of them is in the sister island of Gozo, and he should have retired like 20 years ago. You know, so I passed by his blacksmith once, so, you know, and the other guy lives on this island as well. So, I mean, it's difficult. It's different. I mean, there are people who are tools and enthusiasts and that who work with tools and that sort of thing. But I don't think there's such a huge maker community as obviously other countries. Like, you know, point of note, in the first Maker Central 2018, out of sheer coincidence, I met 2 other Maltese people there. Yeah, I never met anyone else from Malta, but yeah, there were 2 Maltese people there. So
fantastic.
It could be the case that I'm not maybe privy to them, like to the maker circle.
Of course, yeah.
That's the problem with introverts, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you say you're not really an introvert in terms of sort of dealing with people, but I think my observation is that a lot of people who would perhaps be described as makers are introverts. So even if you're not the introvert, if they are, you might not know what they're making.
Yeah, it's true.
Of course, yeah.
It's true. But yeah, I mean, there is interest. Of course, 3D printers are obviously like a hot topic. They've been a hot topic for about 4 or 5 years now, especially since they've become really affordable. You know, and now we're seeing like affordable, not necessarily what you call them, DLP printers.
Yeah.
So, you know, like resin printers are becoming even more affordable. In fact, I am very I'm very tempted to dip my finger there, but not just yet. But yes, I mean, as I said, cosplay though is a huge thing in Malta. We have a small Comic-Con every year. I mean,
Okay.
so you get a lot of cosplayers, and some of them are very good friends of mine as well. And I've worked with some of them and collaborated with many of them as well. I've made parts of costumes for them, and they've made parts of costumes for me as well. We've worked together.
Oh,
on
fantastic.
costumes as well. So yeah.
Yeah, 'cause you do quite a lot of kind of prop making and stuff as well as the cosplay. I suppose if there's not that many like leather workers, that's probably a little bit of a good market for you there in that kind of thing.
Here's the thing, though. Yes, I have a lot of opportunity for leather work, but mostly I do take a couple of commissions. I don't try to make it like very commercial because I just want to enjoy the making stuff. I just do it for a couple of friends, you know. But mostly I do archery stuff. I go to archery as well. There's a range which my friend runs, and I do quivers, bracers, that sort of thing. I'm due to host a bracer making class sometime in August. I have to get that.
Cool. Fantastic.
That's interesting. But for cosplay, I've made belts. I've made like shin guards recently.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing with leather is expensive.
It is, yeah.
Usually cosplay is like something that it's not a thing that you wear once, but you don't want to wear it every year.
You know, it's like it's a budget, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's not an everyday wear kind of thing.
Yeah. So you can scratch vegetable leather like off the chart immediately because it's going to cost you a lot. So
yeah, I suppose like pre-finished splits and things are about the only thing you can really kind of.
Yeah, I mean chrome tans. Chrome tans are pretty affordable. I once made I was making the costume for Wonder Woman for my girlfriend about 4 years ago, I think, or 3 years ago, and I made the skirt entirely out of blue chrome tan leather, which cost me nothing because I got them from scraps. It was an upholster, and I a friend of mine messaged him, told him, listen, I just need a strip of like brown leather. I was making the Skyrim Warhammer back then, in 2017, and he said, yeah, sure, come over and you can have like whatever you need. And he gave me like a whole garbage bag full of scraps, and it was like, it was for free. And I still have them. Like from 2017. I was using them like 2 weeks ago to make like dice pouches for DnD and that sort of thing on the live stream. So yeah, I mean, scraps are a good source of costume material.
And especially free scraps.
Oh yeah.
Best price.
Yeah,
absolutely the best
$3.99.
Yeah.
So there's a big sort of cosplay community. Why do you think that is? Why do you think kind of sort of if I think sort of cosplay, I tend to think of I guess Adam Savage, Tested, Dragon Con, the big San Diego Comic Con, sort of the big cons like that. Maybe London, but I wouldn't necessarily think Malta.
Well, I mean, what I notice, and I think this is just going to be my own hypothesis, honestly. We grew, like most of the cosplayers are around my age or maybe a little bit younger than me. And we grew up in the 90s without access to like international television. We used to have like Italian television. Back then they used to broadcast the Italianized version, the dubbed version of like Japanese anime, at the time. So I think that is what most of us grew up with, like the Japanese culture, and cosplay is very strong in Japan. Like a lot of people cosplay Japanese characters, in fact.
Absolutely, yeah.
But then it sort of starts growing then, because then you start looking at what you can make, what other characters are there. Oh, look, I like that game. What can I make from that game? And that's how you start. And a lot of my friends, I think, went that way. There's a lot of influence by Disney movies. For example, a very good friend of mine, Gabriella, she makes a lot of Disney princesses costumes, and she wears them for Comic-Con and stuff like that. And they're beautiful pieces of art. I mean, she's so talented, and I've had the good fortune to work with her, and we made a cape together for my Witcher costume for live action roleplay as well.
Nice.
So, and that's the thing, though. And then we start working together. And then you start sort of learning from them, start learning how to use a sewing machine, for example. I mean, I had an idea, but I actually sort of learned from my friends on how to use it properly. What is a serger? What is an overlock machine? You start learning these little things from one another. And I've done the same for them. Recently, and I'm soon due to meet another friend also. they usually come over my workshop. We make a leather belt, or we make a shin guard or an arm guard or something, and we carve it together. I show them how to do it, and they learn something as well. So that we share this knowledge, and
it's a fantastic way to do it with that. Just like you say, that kind of helping each other out, building each other's skills up and things is it's a fantastic way to do that. As you know, instead of just like sitting watching football or something, you know, constructive and productive and helpful and useful and
I think
sorry to dig at all the football supporters, but
I mean,
it's all right. They're not here. They're not there.
It always comes down to this feeling of belonging, I suppose. I mean, it's so for me, it's been a very topic close to heart. You know, I mean,
of course, yeah.
I've had friends growing up, but I've never had friends which I could really share my interests with. And like nowadays that I have access to the internet, I have access to making and this sort of thing. It's always like a matter of not if, but a matter of when. You know, like you're going to find people who share your interests, and you just get together.
So sorry, Jamie, you go on. You go on. We'll have to start doing hands up or something. Yeah,
far too British.
Yes. You mentioned there sort of the live action role play, which for those who aren't familiar with it would be.
Oh boy. Okay. You're lucky because I cooled off from 2 years ago. Anyway, so live action role play is obviously role playing. So you're given a character, you make a character, and you act that character out over a scenario. Now, I got hooked when I went to Witcher school in 2019. And I went there. I had no idea what was supposed to go on. So I honestly went there. I just made a pair of bracers and a belt, which I made myself, and the rest was like put together. So basically, I went there for a whole weekend, and I was role-playing a character from the Witcher universe. It was like a generic character. It's not part of the series or the books or anything. But we stayed in a castle for the whole weekend. No electricity, no internet. Like, it was amazing. We had foam swords. I actually have them back there because I bought my own swords eventually. And
nice.
That's the thing. Then I started going overboard. So I came back from live action roleplay from Witcher school. I said, okay, so next year I'm going again. So what should I do next year? So a friend of mine who does reenactments, medieval reenactments, wanted to sell his gambesons, his quilted vests, and sold them to me very cheaply. And I got them, started modifying them. Okay, I removed the sleeves so they look cool. They don't look realistic, but they look cool. Okay, so what else can I do? Made bracers. Now, okay, I'm gonna stop. I made belts. I made like shin guards. I made a cape. I made like a scabbard for my swords and everything. And then again, this cosplay community in Malta is small, so everyone they told me about Witcher School. So when everyone saw what I was making for Witcher School, like these leather parts, like, okay, I want this. Okay. So yes, sorry, to go back to your question, live action role basically is where you start acting out as a character, like in a fantasy setting usually. And you basically you're not Kurt in that setting, you're just role playing. In that case, actually, it was Davin Corso, which is where Corso Workshop actually came from.
So I think it's one of those things as well that I think a lot of makers have heard of LARP, but might not have actually made the connection that live action role play is LARPing.
Yeah,
you know, that kind of thing of just hearing this, you know, these words and never really looking into it or things like that. But another sort of hopeful future guest is another LARPer and prop maker, leather worker type friend of mine who actually also worked on season 2 of The Witcher. So hopefully we'll be able to get maybe do some sort of like session with the pair of you on, you know, talking about the stuff like that. Might be a nice sort of thing down the line or something maybe.
I'd love to. I mean, to be honest, I've only went there once, I'll be honest, but I got so hooked. I mean, it's not just that, it's the drive, the passion for making that sort of sparked, because I've been making stuff like for YouTube since about 2017, I think 2018, that time. And back then I used to have a channel called Borch 3D, which was focused on like 3D printing, prop making. But when I came back from Witcher School,
I think is how I found you. I think.
That's,
I think
that's
that's
exactly
how
how
we
I
met.
found it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we met. No, sort of. I said, listen, I want to do 3D printing and prop making, but I want to do the more rustic leather working, kind of aspects of it. So I sort of rebranded, but like it stoked this fire, this passion for making. And honestly, I'm still working to this day, like on different costumes, different parts, and like have a minute and then sort of I sketch something and then try to make it, So always for the costumes.
So that was something I was going to ask. Does stuff like the role playing and the fantasy side influence your making, or does the making influence your direction with the role play, or is it a bit of both?
I think it has to be a bit of both. First of all, when I'm making something with leather, if I'm going to wear it for something like live action role play, I will try to, as much as possible, make it as authentic looking as possible. And by that, for example, hand stitching stuff together rather than machine stitching them. For example, avoiding glues if possible, just stitching stuff together, try to keep it a little bit rustic. But then, there are certain barriers like certain barriers of convenience that nowadays you have to. If you're going to be sewing for 4 hours straight, which I've done before,
Yep.
At this point, you might as well do it with the sewing machine and just hide the seam. You know what I mean?
Well, that's an Adam Savage thing, isn't it? When you get to a certain proficiency of making, it's not so much a case of not making mistakes; it's just learning to hide them better. I think that's key for everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
Working what corners you can cut, or maybe hand stitch a little bit and then just machine stitch the rest.
Yeah, but it's also is a bit of the reverse, as you said. It must influence. For me at least, it influenced a bit the way I played during the game. Because, for example, since I had my own braces and my own belt, I made them, so I sort of made a story about them, of how they were made. I could choose not to include them in the story, to be honest, but it was like I made them, I want to show them off.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. And mind, they were not very good quality. They were my very first bracers I made, so they were like not resisted, so they went matte after 2 weeks. They started sort of graying out, and I used like very flimsy buckles, which I couldn't fasten properly, so I had like stuff like a piece of cloth underneath to get them tight enough. But then started to learn a bit better.
Well, that's just a part of the character's development, and as you upgrade your character's armor, then I suppose you've got that kind of progression and story for the next
Yeah, he made the braces large on purpose.
It's allowed for growth.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a little while ago on another podcast, which I won't mention, but it's not the one behind Jamie. One of the hosts sort of said the maker community pretty much is just woodworkers. And I even though I was out walking the dog at the time of reading, I was like, no, absolutely not. And that's not even to kind of the fact that there are metal workers and blacksmiths as well. But I have this impression, and I might be wrong, that although woodworkers do make up a significant portion of the maker community, and by that I mean kind of the maker community that is engaged in social media, and I know that there's a huge number of woodworkers who don't do social media. They go out to their sheds because woodworking is very accessible. Yeah, people often have some of the tools because they're the sort of things you have when you're doing DIY. Saws and drills and the like, and chisels. They are things that are easy to get. They're relatively easy to work with. It's certainly in the UK, if you're kind of old enough, it was a standard part of sort of school education to kind of do some woodwork. So people had a lot of experience with it. But I think I've delved around the internet a bit, on the kind of the maybe not the deep dark net, so I gotta stay away from stuff like that. But Jamie just put his hand up for the benefit of the audio listeners later in the week. But I can't. Yeah, I've spent time in the maker community, and I've spent time sort of searching around various different parts of the maker community. And this is going back before I was kind of on social media in part of the sort of maker community, when I was sort of teaching, particularly when I was teaching a little bit of technology in school. I was having to kind of develop some of my, not necessarily skills, but understanding of what was out there. And I was also I was looking for resources and looking for ideas to kind of help my students. And in doing that, I kind of reached into the kind of the cosplay, the people making it things for LARP, and coming across people like I've forgotten his name now, but the foam guy, the foam smith guy, Build Around, that's it. Yeah, I came across sort of that, and people using EVA punish props. Yeah, and people using things like EVA foam mats to make all sorts of things. And this is kind of almost before 3D printing was as accessible as it is now.
Yeah.
And on my kind of YouTube subscription list, there are significant numbers of people that sort of do cosplay. And having been to Makers Fairs and Maker Central and places like that, I actually think that there's this hidden core of makers that probably don't call themselves makers, but are actively involved in cosplay and live action role play and reenactments and things like that actually they are makers and
too right.
Perhaps make up a very, very large number of people. And I think they're probably from the kind of the maker, not necessarily the maker fair, but I think perhaps makers community tends to sit in clumps. And I think perhaps the kind of the woodworkers, the wood turners, the scroll sawers, the people making the fancy joinery, the flat workers, all that, maybe don't necessarily realise that there's this other significant portion of makers, some of whom are doing things with wood as well.
Well, I mean, you sort of touched on the before that obviously wood is very accessible, and that you often, you have tools passed down or things like that are, kind of people's sort of first toe dipped into kind of DIY or woodworking or making something, to fill a purpose. But, if you think, I mean, I'd probably argue that plastic is not far behind. If you look at, I mean, obviously the 3D printing community now is hugely prolific with how accessible that is. I know we spoke about that earlier, but like growing up for me, my older brothers and my granddad and so people that were around me growing up were doing things like airfix kits and these things, plastic kits that you would make, and pretty much everyone who made an airfix kit was modifying it in some way or finding, solving the problems, adjusting bits to make them fit better, or things like that, or even going back
adding it to a diorama.
Exactly. Maybe you might grab a bit of pine floorboard or something and screw a car down onto it or something to make a little diorama or something. But it's things like that again, you're still a maker, but you might not necessarily call yourself one because you're building a kit or painting a plane and hanging it from your ceiling or things like that. But it's often a something you would tend to find before you'd find woodwork. I would say, even like in school, making little model kits for things out of just sheet plastic and things.
Yeah. I mean, you guys mentioned earlier that like woodworkers sort of seem to be the major portion of makers, and I have to admit, when I first met, like when I went to 2018, I met like my first impression of makers, and in the UK at least, in Birmingham, I was like, everyone turns wood. Like everyone. Like I don't even know anyone who owns a lathe.
Yeah,
And like,
it was Turner Central, the first one, I think.
yeah, I mean, but I was
Yeah.
I was impressed. I was genuinely impressed about the sheer amount of wood turners there, and sort of it shook me a little bit. I'll be honest. But yes,
I
as
think
you're
that was
saying,
actually all the Turners in the UK.
but yeah, it is that you're saying. I mean, there's always like for I think to quote Adam Savage, it's like there's always a gateway drug to making. Like everyone has one,
Yeah,
and you might not call yourself a maker. Half my friends who do cosplay don't call themselves makers, but they are working with materials. They're making something at the end of the day.
I mean, a good sandwich is a gateway drug to being a maker.
And
Yeah.
I have Lego sets nowadays. I collect Lego sets, obviously, because I can afford them nowadays.
Yep.
But when I was a kid, that's how I got started as well.
Same,
Model cars. I remember being a kid, like I was about 8 years old. I was building my first car with my father, and for some reason wouldn't go together. And then I was like, my father had to go to work. I ended up on the in the garage floor and just dismantled everything and put it back together. It was like the proudest achievement of my life till then. Like I built a car. Sort of that feeling stuck. I mean, it gets lost over the years, but then you sort of pick it back up again, and that's the same feeling that you get from. Yeah, and I'm seeing on the comments, Caveman Carl said like Warhammer 40k, for example. They're mentioning like tabletop war games. That's another thing.
Yeah.
I have models nowadays as well.
And totally makers, building and modifying the armies and everything, but then building the battle scene for it to take place in, and again, it's totally makers.
Yeah. And then I tend to sort of take it a little step further, usually, in the sense that I like something in that universe, so I make something from that universe. So, like from Warhammer 40k, I made the Thunder Hammer. It's hanging right there. You can't really see it because of the cabinet, but I made the Thunder Hammer prop. So I 3D modeled it, 3D printed it, and made it like to scale. So I look at it every night before I go to bed, and it's like I look at it with a little bit of pride, of course, because I made that, and that's a thing that I try to share with everyone. Like when you make stuff. I mean, you don't have to make stuff to feel proud, but if you make stuff, you're going to be really proud of the stuff that you make.
Absolutely, yeah. Really, I mean, you've only got to look at kids, when wooden blocks building their first tower. It's that look on their face of like, look, I've made a really big tower.
Yeah.
Granted, they then usually follow that up by smashing it down, but
that's for learning
it all
physics.
Comes full circle.
Make it again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Learning gravity.
Yeah. I used to always say that when my daughter fell off the couch or something like that. It's like, oh, she learned about gravity.
So yeah, I mean, there's always I think every generation of makers, my age, my father's age, my grandfather's age, like everyone's had their thing to make. I mean, my grandfather is still used to make train sets for us. I'm seeing train sets in the the chat as well. I'm seeing my grandfather made us like a whole sheet of plywood. He decorated all of it, put all the rails, and we had an electric train kit going around. I remember it as a kid. He used to do it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
My father-in-law's the same. He's pretty much converted most of the loft into, I'll wander around there and he's going, oh, you never believe this. I wanted like 3 of these, but they're really expensive. So I bought 100 of them from China. And now I'm just making the rest of them,
I think train sets are a bit like kind of wood turning. I think people who are kind of it's the kind of maybe slightly older gentleman, maybe semi-retired, who kind of I want to do something. His wife says, you've got to do something because you've got to get out of my hair because having you around the house is not something I've really got used to after 30, 40 years. So do something. So they either kind of end up going down to kind of the wood turning route and having a shed down the bottom of the garden, or they
go shed type stuff.
Go back to kind of their childhood and build a model railway in their loft.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
I mean, my girlfriend's is a little bit worried about me now because we're soon we're buying our first property, our first home together, and I've already got like these plans for it. Like, okay, washroom, we're going to convert into a workshop. Yes, but one of the garages is going to be a woodworking shop. And I don't.
You'll need a 3D print room as well, surely.
Obviously, yeah, of course, I have
Of course,
to. I have to have a place for it, and
Yeah.
I think she had to go to bed early today because she has an early day tomorrow. But I'm going to say it now while she can't hear me. I'm going to have like a secret room with like a bookcase that opens up, that sort of thing. She's going to
Fantastic.
come home every day and she's going to find something different. It's a way to keep like the mystery going,
Yeah, of course.
But seriously, I mean, I think like that this sort of making experience is such a great thing, honestly. And I honestly try to make it a point. Like if I'm a scout leader as well, and I try to sort of impart it in my scouts in some shape or form, whether it is like woggles for their neckerchief or their scarf or something. I try to make stuff with them as well. It's sort of good skill.
Yeah, I think it's like you said. It's empowering, especially for kids of that kind of age as well. To think, well, I want this thing, but I might not be able to buy it, but can I make it? And then that, like you said, that first kind of dopamine hit of like, I made this. This didn't exist before, and now I've used some tools and bits of material, and I've made the thing. And then it is that sort of gateway drug of like that once you've made that first thing, I can do stuff.
Yeah. And if it's like, if there's anyone who's watching and is kind of on the fence on whether they should start making that sort of stuff, I still get that rush nowadays.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
A couple of months back, I made a Jedi holocron. Like I 3D modeled and made it.
I saw that on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah, but you can only light it up with magnetic ring.
Oh,
so I didn't know any electronics. So I didn't know any electronics too. So I sort of started learning and going into it, and with Arduino Nanos, and so we got into it. Like at the end of like after a couple of weeks working on it, I got it. I was like, yes, made it work. And you still get that rush. It never goes away.
Yeah,
there's no diminishing returns, at least for me. So,
like you say,
I think that's right.
It's a great way to learn something as well. If you've got that kind of project and that goal, and the fact that we've got this sort of welcoming set of people who will, sort of fill in the blanks when you need to and stuff. There's no gatekeeping as such, and or you can't learn that because you're a leather worker or you make props, so you can't learn electronics. It's just like, oh yeah, I'll show you how to do that.
I think that's what I think I like about the cosplay community. I mean, it's not something I've been into. I kind of, maybe if I was younger and hit the right crowd, I can imagine that I probably could get involved in it. But that idea that there's a project in mind, there's a costume in mind, and it's not just one piece; it's multiple pieces. It's a tunic, it's a belt, it's a bag, it's a sword, and and then there's kind of there's an object, and that object, well, we want that object to glow. So how am I going to do that? And there's so many kind of cosplayers that I've sort of seen and some that I follow where they kind of go, I want to produce this, so I'm going to have to learn these 5 different sets of skills. I'm not maybe going to be the best 3D printer person in the world, but I'm going to be good enough to make the thing that I want to make. I'm going to be able to produce something, and I'll cover it in Bondo and I'll sand it and make up for some of them. Maybe just the short kind of hiding it, and as we said earlier, sometimes the skill in making is actually how to hide our shortcomings, our mistakes. And as we get better, we get better. I'm trying to remember who said it now. There was somebody who was talking, and they were talking about it kind of from the point of view of woodworking, and even kind of professional tradesmen. You're talking about as you get better and you become more professional, you make fewer mistakes, but you also become better at hiding your mistakes. Yeah,
I think I've heard that from a few different people.
Yeah, kind of.
So I think so I think it's nice that there's that kind of range of things. But okay, you mentioned there you're sort of scout leader, so there's that you're starting to. I mean, I was involved in scouts as a boy and as a young man, and there was definitely a kind of a spirit of making. I mean, my scout leaders were, I mean, they were old men back in the 80s, and many of them kind of had come through kind of the war. So there was a spirit of we make things. We do make do. We don't get much money, so we buy stuff. We fix it if we want to use it. If the tents are ripped, we fix them, and we make them. And we want to do something. We want to it kind of what was called pioneering in the time. Where you kind of take broomsticks and or sticks that you've kind of cut down from trees, and you lash them together to make frames, and then you kind of you produce structures from that. And so there was that kind of whole sort of spirit of making that kind of fitted in with the Baden-Powell's sort of spirit of what scouting was about.
Creative problem solving with found materials, isn't it, essentially?
Yeah. I think that in essence is still there. Like, I was lucky enough when I was growing up as a kid that I had leaders who were from that kind of background as well, so they sort of imparted that to me. And I do see it in a lot of other groups in Malta. So that spirit is still alive and kicking. But unfortunately, nowadays I have come sort of to terms with the fact that kids these days have different interests than I had when I was a kid. So while I used to play with toys, nowadays they play with tablets and phones. And while that may seem wrong to an older generation, it's like all they're doing is playing with their toys of this age. I mean, it's just the equivalent of our toys back then. So I mean, it's just kids these days, at least the ones that I meet, and I'm very proud of them. But don't get me wrong, they're very good kids. They don't have the same kind of background from us, so it is little bit more of a challenge to try and spark that interest in making and interest in doing these sorts of things with them. But once you get them going, they take off, and that's the thing about making. Again, that once you start making it, then you start feeling, the interest towards it, and you start to want to make more. And I have kids nowadays who. I actually mentioned it in my live stream earlier today, but a few years back I had a summer camp, and we did a maker-themed summer camp. And some of the kids had never used a jigsaw. Granted, it's a dangerous tool, of course, but with supervision, it's, you can use it. I used to use a jigsaw when I was 11 years old. Back then.
I was going to say, like with anything, if you learn how to use it properly, some people would say that, a pocket knife is too dangerous, but you can't really do scouts without one.
Yeah, so back then we took a bunch of pellets, we dismantled them and made wooden swords out of them, took a bit of aluminum tape, made them look semi-realistic, and they had the time of their life.
They've made swords?
Yeah. It's nowadays they still tell me, like, when are we going to have another maker camp? When are we going to have another maker camp? Like, okay, I'd love to make a maker camp every summer, but I can't. I'd love to.
Like you need some funding or something.
Perhaps.
Or if the Malta Maker Fair goes ahead, maybe you can access some people who might be able to help you make it something happen.
I was invited, to be honest. I was asked to participate in it. I was going to have a stand with some leatherworking stuff, and I believe I was asked also to do like a talk on leatherworking, that sort of thing. But my involvement was a little bit later on in the stage, and it was already sort of looking really bad with COVID. So I never really got involved properly. But once, if it does actually take off, I will definitely ask again to be involved, because I would like to take my kids as well from Scouts to something like this, because there would be a lot of interesting stuff. And some of them are interested in robotics and programming, and there'll be all sorts of things.
Nice.
And that's the thing about making. I think it's a little bit of a misconception that a lot of people, as you were saying earlier, think that making is woodworking, metalworking, maybe leatherworking, but like robotics, electronics, sword making, like
absolutely,
you're making something. You're a maker, and there's no two ways about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally. So, I think that's the thing, though. I think it's an innate human thing, though, isn't it? It's, at the end of the day, because I know I sort of joked about the sandwich thing earlier, but if you're actively making decisions about ingredients you're putting into the food that you're going to eat, you're making something. It's the same thing. It's just whether you change those ingredients to be, instead of a pan, some fire, and a stick to stir the ingredients. It's a welder or a saw or a 3D printer or a CAD package or something like that. It's all Granted, I know sewing machines don't work too well with plate steel, but
Yeah,
Just go get the right needles.
Exactly. Yeah.
it's kind of a running joke here right now because I have a leather-working sewing machine that cannot sew leather. It does sew some kinds of leather, and I've seen people use it like they've sewn like tires together, like vulcanized rubber together, and for some reason I can't get it through like 3 mils of Western leather. But anyways, like every Sunday I try to use it and it never works. But anyway, but some of my friends are keeping score now, 5-2, machine's winning.
You some friends, yeah. I think that's. I think there's so much to unpack here. I'm trying to think, which way to direct the kind of sort of the conversation. Let's go on back onto the leather a little bit. So you picked up the leather after getting involved in Witcher school, or is it something that predates it?
It's kind of okay. So I had been following Dark Horse Workshop for a very long time.
I know.
And that's amazing leatherworking stuff. I mean, if there are people who don't follow, go and follow. You're in for a treat. And then Kit from Skilltree published his very first video on a pair of leather bracers with a Warcraft theme, like World of Warcraft, the game and the movie. Mm-hmm. And I'm a huge fan of World of Warcraft, the game. I've been playing it for years now. So I saw that, and then I was about to go to Witcher school, to the LARP. And I said, what is a great opportunity to start leatherworking and see what it's all about. I bought a very cheap piece of leather. It was vegetable tan, but it was like horrible. At the back you could see it was all like crisscrossed. It was very cheap quality. But that's how you get started.
A few of those.
Yeah. I bought like a couple sets of tools from China, and at first they didn't get delivered, so I ordered another pack. And then they both got delivered, so I had twice the tools then.
I think we've all been there with that, yeah.
Yeah. So then I started making a couple of bracers, then I made a belt, and that's how I got started. And then since then, I've been doing a little bit of everything. I think I have some here. I made like potion holders, for example. I made a more recent version. It's actually under the bed because that's where I store my stuff, so I can't really access it. But yeah, I mean, that's how I got started, honestly. It wasn't because of the LARP, but it was like a bit of a trigger. I said, if there's a good time, might as well do it now. Yeah.
So was it something that you'd be following Dark Horse for a while? So it was just kind of a case of, I like that, I'm going to have a go.
Only a matter of time.
I'm very impressionable that way. Ask my girlfriend. I've been meaning to start blacksmithing for years now.
It's good fun.
And I haven't because I don't have the space for it. Honestly, I mean, I use my father's garage. My brother obviously puts the car in the evening, so I get the garage mostly on a Sunday or a Saturday. If I ask to take it out, of course I can use it, but I can't store a forge in there. I have no space. And I've been trying small ones. Yeah.
Might be worth looking at something like an induction forge.
I've heard of those, but I heard that they also consume a lot of electricity.
They can do, but you can get. It depends how big of a thing you want to start playing with. You can get relatively small, relatively inexpensive induction forges that can kind of forge, an area like that. So a bit of bar to at least just get you started doing little bits and stuff. And you can run them from things like car batteries and stuff. 12-volt induction forges.
Cool. I will look into them. I was actually looking at coffee can forges.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, Kate told me about those. So those are interesting. But to be fair, then I wouldn't want to go for a huge forge, of course. I mean, I would want something small. But probably I like the idea of sort of walking through the ages, like the different steps. So probably I would start with a coal forge and then move up from there. Because I like that kind of mentality where I start to learn sort of the very basics. And then...
Because I had a really long chat with Steve House from Tools and Tools when I started doing a bit of blacksmithing. I mean, having said that, it's been a while since I've done any blacksmithing. But when I was looking to sort of forge, I was in that kind of like, do I go solid fuel or do I go gas forge and stuff? And from chatting with Steve, who works using both, so professionally, he was saying that the kind of if you're doing production stuff, gas is great.
Yeah.
But if you want to like that visceral feel of yeah, I'm a blacksmith, then a solid fuel forge is absolutely the way to go, because you feel so much more connected to it. You know, it's all the fire, and you put stuff in, and you're moving the coals, and it's it's much more
sparks.
Yeah, it's really fun and visceral rather than just I'll just switch the gas on and click, and it's a different kind of experience.
Yeah, it's true. And honestly, I wouldn't go for like a commercial kind of thing. I wouldn't go for production. I would just do it for like the fun of it, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Make a couple of stuff for myself. And actually,
to make your own sword.
Excuse me?
To make your own sword and dagger.
Yeah. I mean, you can't.
You burn the pallet wood.
Yeah, I mean, this actually brings to mind like another thing, though. It's a little bit of a drawback then it comes to making. It's like a disadvantage to being a maker. You can't watch a good movie where there's making and not get frustrated at it.
It really breaks the suspension of disbelief, doesn't it?
I mean, I've been following blacksmith for years now. I watch like Steel House, and I love blacksmithing, even though I haven't gotten into it yet. But I still can't get past Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers, when they cast swords and expect them to perform. And this is such a gripe that I have nowadays. I really enjoyed it as a kid, and nowadays I can watch it. I'm like, I can't do that.
Well, it explains why they lost. Spoiler alert for people who haven't read the book or seen the films.
Like every time we watch the movie, like everyone who's sitting around, like, shut up, no one cares. Like, yes, what I care. Like, this shouldn't. Anyway, it's like one of those things that's a little bit of disillusioning sometimes.
There's a lot of things like that. It's, once you've got a little bit of knowledge in something, you see it in the film, and it's it's a fantastic show that I've ranted at so many times, and it's called Scorpion. It's kind of like loosely based around a guy that actually exists, and like some of the stories are kind of loosely based. He's a super genius type, runs a think tank in the States, but he in the show they do lots of things that are really. Like there's one bit where they needed to modify a tablet to be able to see in a different spectrum or something, and he just kind of like pulls the back off the tablet and then just like pokes a few wires in and puts this other camera in, and then it works. And and like every single episode, you go, "Oh yeah, this is really cool. This is really, really." No, that wouldn't work. Oh, turn it off.
The equivalent of MacGyver with a straw, elastic band, and a paper clip taking down a helicopter, I believe.
Exactly that.
Yeah, some chewing gum.
It is like a techie version of MacGyver. Yeah.
I loved MacGyver and the A-Team as a kid, but I can't watch them now. And never mind the mullets, but once you realise that actually, you can't actually do that. It does kind of sort of spoil it a little. I think that
would be a perfect album title for us if we did a band. Never mind the mullets.
Although I really could do the haircut. It's a wonderful world that we're involved in, isn't it? This maker community, really. It's something I'm glad for. I think sort of nearly every day. Yeah, the sort of people I get to kind of talk with every day. I just sort of come together through the maker community, but just the things that I can watch. I hardly ever watch TV nowadays because I'd much rather watch people making things. If I can't do the making myself, far more interesting. It's
fewer terrible adverts in between as well.
Getting there. You get to skip some of them. Yeah, you get to skip some.
Yeah,
which does help. We're narrowing. Let's start thinking about. Cause I am aware that Kurt's an hour ahead of us.
Don't worry.
I know. So let's start thinking about what's been grabbing our attention. As guest, Kurt, do you want to go first? And
Thank you.
what's been grabbing your attention lately?
Well, I mean, I'm a kind of person that is. I can't focus on one thing at a time. I have to have a lot of different interests going on at the same time. But
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, but recently I've been sort of binge watching again and like keeping up with a good friend of mine, Kit. We've mentioned him from Skill Tree. Makes these really cool, awesome projects like props and that sort of thing as well. But I don't think he's ever referred to them as props, but he's actually prop making, like making like wooden swords from his Dungeons and Dragons campaign and the ring with resins and that sort of. It's really really great. It also sort of ties very much with my interest as well, like Dungeons and Dragons, like role playing, tabletop gaming, that sort of thing. It's a huge part of my personality. It's a huge part of what I enjoy. So I've been watching a lot of Skill Tree recently. I've been following an artist on Instagram. Oh My Goals, I think her handle, her tag is. She makes like these really cute comics about everyday life with her dogs and like what happens like during the day and that sort of thing. They're usually a little bit funny. They're mostly cute and they're nice. I've had a chat with her as well recently. Very nice person. Almost like creative writing is what I've been doing recently a lot of. Like creative writing in the sense like preparing for a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. I've got a huge project lined up and I have to really prepare for it. So yeah.
Sounds
nice.
good.
World building, map making, that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, is that something that's going to be shared with the general public down the line, or is that a personal project?
No, it's going to be a shared. It's going to be a huge undertaking with 4 other friends of mine. It's not going to be very maker related, but it's going to be very maker parallel, I think, because I can take a lot of material from the creative aspect there, bring them into life as props, that sort of thing, which is something that I really enjoy doing anyway.
Fantastic, yeah.
Nice.
Good to have that kind of overlap.
Yeah.
I'll make sure the links for those that are listening are in the show notes, which will be on essentially the YouTube description for the post. So they'll get updated possibly in a couple of days' time. As much as I try and do it the following day, it tends to be sort of Tuesday night or Wednesday by the time the show notes get
Life
updated.
happens.
For those listening on audio, that probably means they're already there because I tend to release the audio at the same time or thereabouts. So,
spoiler alert.
So if you're listening on audio on a podcast app of choice, then please at some point divert yourself over to the YouTube channel Makers Waffle, which we now have the custom URL. We have been going for over a month, so that is now in place. I did that just this weekend.
So what else has been grabbing your attention then, Andy, while you've been
sorting out a URL? Yeah, grabbing a URL. Not a huge amount this week, just kind of life's been a bit of a busy week this week, but had to do a bit of door fixing. Had some handles, one of our living room door, the handle's been a bit wonky for far too long. It got to a point where it was getting almost to the point where not opening the door was going to be an issue. So I changed that yesterday. But I think I need to have another look at it because I think the tumbler latch, so one of the sort of tubular latches, I think may be a bit wonky because although the handles have been changed, it's still catching a bit. Everything's in.
That's brave, only changing the handle.
Yeah, well, I've already changed it once because it snapped at one point. The original tubular lock. The doors have been on about 5 years.
That's sprung in your hands.
Well, I used to be a climber.
You're a bit of a Superman.
Yeah, I used to be a climber. Actually, Spider-Man was my nickname when I was in industry before I started teaching. I used to climb up the sides of we had manufactured cement bond particle boards, so 8x4 sheets, and they were pallet loads of these, kind of 15, 20 feet high. And sometimes, as part of the quality control team, we needed serial numbers off the edges of the boards. Or to identify which ones we needed to sample, or if those had been a problem or some such. So I used to literally climb up the sides of the pallets with my notepad and sort of write things down much to the amazement of some of my colleagues who kind of like, how can you even get up there? Never mind, how do you
I'm sure the HSE
write
loved you.
at the same time?
With caution.
Yeah, health and safety. That company. Yeah, that's why I've got a screwed back. Yeah, that's. Yeah, I could rant about that. I know.
It's
I know
not the
Alex
climbing
Cannell's
that
been-
damages you, it's the 3 tons of lifting stuff every day that you
Yeah, awkwardly lifting. Yeah, that was the problem. Climbing was the easy bit. Yeah, probably was not the best thing, but as we were so far behind on everything all the time, it was the quickest way of doing it. So yeah, so I got the tubular latch. Probably needs replacing. I'm not sure why it does move in far enough, but it's not moving in far enough. So it's kind of still catching a bit. So that'll be a job for this next week. Apart from that, something did catch my eye this week. Scott Grove from the channel Imagine Grove. A channel I would recommend. He's a professional fabricator, woodworker. He does some amazing work. I think. Do you remember if he was at Maker Central in 2019? Can't remember.
No, me either. We might have been.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But he produced some lovely work. He's really good about sort of also giving tips about things. But this week he released a short video about a piece that he had made. It's a piece of sculpture essentially, but it was produced for a trophy. So essentially, it's imagine a circle with the centre cut out, so sort of 2 or 3 inches left, and nicely shaped. And then he lined the inside. It was made of wood, but he lined the inside with essentially an artificial bark. So you've got this piece of. It almost looks like you've taken a piece of wood, cut it, and then bent it back in on itself.
Oh, cool.
To form almost like a crescent, with bark on the inside and some gold leaf at the end, and it's mounted on a little stand, and it's absolutely beautiful, and it kind of fits with on my list of things to make, and a few bits and bobs of wood I've got. I have this. I've been thinking about building some sort of wooden sculptures for a couple of years. Carving is one of the things I like, and it's very similar to something that I've actually got sketched out. He used a lathe, and I don't. The kind of the bark on the inside was a touch that I hadn't thought about, and I probably wouldn't go that way. But it was definitely a piece that was sort of inspiring, and I'll post a link to that particular video. Anyone that's on the Makers on YouTube Facebook group, he posted something, a link to that video yesterday or today, but also put a follow-up picture of something very similar that he'd also made, which is again just a lovely piece of sculpture, not too dissimilar to some of the work that Cameron Porter, Cammy's Garage, sort of makes sometimes. So that's kind of, in terms of videos, that's the one that's particularly caught my eye this week. Jamie,
Cool.
What about you?
It's been quite a tech-heavy week for me this week. So the back end of getting back from the weekend with Steve and Jim last week, so I had a couple of days off work, so it was a good opportunity for me to kind of prod upgrading my server a little bit and sorting a few bits out and making a little mic stand and sort of little bits of just plodding and sort of playing around and prodding and poking various bits and bobs. So lots of like
Tinkering.
geeky playtime and tinkering and stuff. Yeah. But one of the things we did when sort of being in the meat world with a couple of good friends who all enjoy good whiskies, we all brought a couple of whiskies with us. So kind of the working on the Steve's truck during the day and then sampling whiskies in the evening. So kind of with the combination of like techie stuff and then drinking whiskey, I was watching a bit of Big Clive earlier today. Who, for those not familiar with Big Clive, he does a lot of tech-heavy type stuff. Buying weird and wonderful bits of technology from eBay and China and places like that, and then dismantling them and hacking
Pound
them and
land.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things he's been doing recently is some sort of experiments with alcohol, and he bought like a water purification thing, kind of a bit like a fractal distillation sort of thing, and he's been redistilling spirits just for the hell of it. And he got a bottle of Lafroig, which is a particularly potent, kind of well known as, almost like a Marmite whiskey, if you like. That he redistilled and separated it out into this beautifully clear liquid that was less Lafroig-y, and this weird bitter syrup that was kind of the all the peaty notes from it. But his brother Ralphie does sort of high-end whiskey and spirits reviews, so he then reviewed it on his channel. So it was this kind of proper spirits reviewer, then kind of picking up this weird thing and giving tasting notes on it, and it's a nice dichotomy because they're two very, very different people, but very sort of loving brothers that mutually respect but rib each other senseless. So yeah, that was a nice little diversion today.
I do like Big Clive. He was on the Simple Electronics podcast week before last, I think. That was interesting to hear him chat. He's an interesting chap. I've followed him for a few years. Yeah, he does some quite diverse videos, doesn't he? Yeah.
Ever so slightly.
Ranging from let's go into the finer details of this particular electronic chip on this item device from a bargain discount shop, and why it's a particularly dangerous piece of equipment, and then the following week it's let's spend 3 hours drinking a variety of alcohols while
under
eating,
a £4 a bottle from
while eating kind of MREs from some armed forces somewhere.
It was quite funny for anyone who goes to watch those two videos. So Clive started out by sort of saying, "Oh, it's a fancy bottle of whiskey, this Lafroig." Starts taking the top off it, and it's like, "Oh wow, it's super fancy. It's got a cork and everything. This is way beyond what I normally drink." And then it gets through to his brother, who then says, "Oh, it's the bog standard Lafroig. It's only the one that you get at the supermarket. Normally, I wouldn't review anything like this. It's sort of way too below me." Two complete opposite extremes of the spectrum.
That's an interesting thing, though. I've never actually seen makers using like chemical or chemistry implements. Like, for example, you mentioned the fractionating column. I mean, you need that to distill alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have never actually seen it in the context of a maker, like project or that sort of thing. It's interesting to think about them.
Absolutely.
There are a few. I mean, again, I know, Kurt, you're kind of a sort of sciencey background, kind of professionally, aren't you? I think.
Yeah, I'm a pharmaceutical technologist. I graduated as a pharmaceutical technologist, and nowadays I work in quality systems in pharmaceutical industry. So
I mean, again, as a sort of scientist myself, and having sort of, there are a variety of channels out there. I think, like the sort of cosplay side of things, where there's a significant portion of the maker community, there are kind of the sciencey makers. I mean, you've got your science channels like Veritasium, Action Lab, and Smarter Every Day. You've got this kind of popular science, and there's kind of the more specialized science, like the periodic table channel from Nottingham University, and minute physics. I mean, physics is my thing, so there's kind of minute physics, and I can't remember her surname, Diane, who's the kind of physics girl.
Yes.
On Twitter, Cohen, I think, Diane Cohen. So I've followed channels like that from a personal and professional interest for many years. But there are some. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but there's a few channels out there
One
where
came to
people do.
mind.
Cody's Lab is a good one.
Yeah.
These labs a good one. And then there are like I kind of remembered of a couple of makers with a very science background, but usually it's about like robotics and like physics, maybe that sort of thing. There's Alan Pan over in America. He does like really cool projects. And on a more comical note, William Osman.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, as funny as the guy is, I mean, the kind of videos he's making stuff, and he's using his like, engineering knowledge to make that sort of thing. So now that I think of it,
And Backyard Science.
as well, yeah. Mark
and people like Mark Rober and things like that as well. Actually,
yeah.
Sciencey background.
King of Random, or TKOR as they are now. I find I can watch some of their stuff. Other times I
agreed. Yeah, I think the older stuff was a bit more what I was into. But I mean, our very own Molten Lake. It's a bit of sciencey stuff in the background there, and among all the other random stuff he does.
Yeah, I mentioned TKOR. It was, I think, one of the first YouTube channels that I think I can remember that sort of got me into making. Back then there was Kip K. Back then,
God, yeah, Kip K.
Remember him? He used to hack like remotes and that sort of thing. And then TKOR back then during when Grant, obviously.
Yeah, when he was still around.
Yeah, he was around.
Yeah.
Still miss the guy though. I mean,
as Pete just said, Stuff Made Here. It's another good one. With a very sciencey background.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned like Grant's videos back when he was the king of random. Things like making butter and his backyard furnace, the can recycling and stuff like that. That's stuff that really influenced me.
Yeah. In fact, I've been banned from trying to make the rocket fuel that he made out of sugar. Thanks to him, I've been banned from making it.
Probably for the best, I suppose.
Probably for the best, yeah.
Yeah, he kind of did get in trouble with that one, didn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. But it sort of also inspired like certain ideas. Like once I remember we were at camping and we wanted to light the campfire in a very sort of novel way. So I remember we actually did. We paused a metal line from a tree to the campfire, and I filled the campfire with glycerin. And then we built like a small wooden airplane filled with potassium. What was it?
Permanganate.
Potassium permanganate, yeah. And we just threw it, and when it hit, it reacted. It's an exothermic reaction. It started a fire, and that's how we started the fire. I still have the footage taken by phone back then. It's been like 2015, I think, or 2016 back then. It's quite interesting.
That gives me ideas actually for because every time I've been to we go to a festival every year, and every time we go, they always have sort of parts of the festival area that are like big fire pits or things like that. And there's always a group of people sat around enjoying the fire. And there's a couple of occasions where there's been sort of younger, more trendy people, should we say, and they've kind of taken a look at me and sort of, you're sort of big and hairy. Can you help light the fire, please? We can't get it going. Having a bit of like, I wonder whether it was work with a bit of vape fluid that's got a bit of glycerin in it, and then take a bit of potassium permanganate with you.
Yeah,
that'd be a nice fun way of doing it.
I mean, glycerin's fairly easy to get hold of from most kind of sort of pharmacies. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, it's even it's in the cake shop as well, or the cake aisle in the supermarkets and stuff. But I mean, because a lot of the trendy people now have the vape fluid and stuff. Because that has glycerin base as well. So maybe just to try it with a bit of that, see if that goes bang. Might be a fun way to do it.
Yeah,
with this magical powder and
for science.
Borrow your vape fluid.
For science, always. Yeah, that's
exactly.
As long as you say it, you're clear.
Yeah, if you write it down, Adam Savage says, yeah.
I was gonna get to exactly that myself. You beat me to it, Andy.
Yeah, I'd love to spend some time talking to Adam Savage. I think I
think we all would.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine he would respond to a kind of a guest request for Makers Waffle. Maybe we'll try.
I mean, we can but try. Once we've overtaken
Yeah.
Joe Rogan, it's only. You know, it's
Well, I
only
think
up
if
from
we
there.
overtake Joe Rogan, I don't think we'll have any issues getting in whoever we want.
We can even get Joe Rogan back on.
Yeah. I have approached. I won't say who, but approached a couple of biggish names this last week, who kind of just through people we know. So
Yeah.
one was through a previous guest, one is through a prospective guest, who
This sounds like an
is
after
fairly
the show
critical to
chat.
me. So yes, yeah, we'll have it in the secret part of the show afterwards. Yeah, we'll sort of have a chat, and yeah, so far no response. It's obviously we're not big enough yet, but
It's still early days.
if, as the saying goes, if you don't ask, you don't get. So
Absolutely, and all 16 of our watchers at the moment will back us up that we can waffle on.
yeah, and which might obviously put off some people. There's some big names. The idea we're just waffling. As I said to a few
Their
people,
loss, isn't it?
we're not here to kind of just do the oh look, you've got a new book out, therefore come on our podcast type approach to podcasting, which is very common. I would rather just kind of get on interesting people, interesting people, and just waffle about a variety of things as we have this evening.
I mean, you do realise that Kurt was saying before that he's doing some creative writing, so you just.
Well,
thrown
it
his
could
book
be
out
the
window.
book. Yes, yeah. Well, no, not at all. We just won't have you on when you're promoting it for sale. Yeah. However, for any publishers, agents listening, if you do want us to promote anyone and you're willing to pay, then we're quite happy to have you on.
We do know someone who's been doing some creative writing. So
Yeah, let's hope that pans out. Yeah, I mean, usually like big names would be. I mean, everyone says that they're a little bit busy as well. So I mean, you can imagine. But I honestly like see big YouTubers like on this kind of platform because honestly, it's casual chat and it's fun and it also humanizes them, which I think is very important.
absolutely, making people accessible, I think, is
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, I don't think, but like you say, I think it does go a long way to maybe thinking, kind of broaching that gap between, where we are as people and where we see them as up on their pedestals and stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of going back full circle to our initial chat about Maker Central in 2018. That is actually was one of the revelations for me. Like that Sunday evening when I was by the bar and having a drink, I was with Ashley Harwood and with Anne from N of All Trades. We're sort of just having a chat while having a drink. I was sort of said like, it's kind of very weird to see like these people just talking about how they have to do laundry next Monday, and sort of they looked at me like, so yes, of course we're normal people, like obviously we have lives. Like you don't think of that when you see them on YouTube, you just see the people making stuff. You don't see like the human aspect.
I mean, people only, especially YouTubers who are trying to make a business, you only show the good stuff, don't you? Because that's the most important bit for continuing your business forward and stuff. So so it's easy to forget, I think, that they are still people at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, and I think that, and especially when, obviously with the kind of YouTube and with the internet, there are those elements who I would say are probably not part of the maker community who maybe have an interest in making, but then kind of choose to troll people in a variety of ways, whether it's the I'm going to say you've done it wrong because I don't really know anything about it, but I've watched half a dozen videos and therefore I think I'm an expert. And because you're especially when it's kind of often you're female or you're young, therefore you can't know about this. Therefore, I'm going
makers
to
and stuff.
Yeah, and you get those kind of people who forget that actually the person they're kind of slating, A, may have much more experience than they have. B, is actually doing it, and C, they're a person. And just saying that they're rubbish or saying, I mean, we've all seen
Keyboard's
some
a great
horrible things
barrier
they
to
say.
realising someone's humanity.
I think that is on par with bad information. I mean, in the sense that
Great, yeah.
if you give someone bad information on how to make something, at the very worst, they can get hurt and, seriously hurt. But at the very least, you sort of drain their enthusiasm for making, and you just, that's one less maker in the world, honestly. And that's not such a good world to look at. Like, if you have less makers, we need more people making stuff, more people appreciating how stuff are made, how stuff is fixed, especially in, I think, today's world. And I think just putting someone else down, just sort of to fuel your own ego, I think at the end of the day, it doesn't benefit anyone, not even oneself, to
Absolutely agree, yeah.
Yeah,
just
so
a loss for everyone.
yeah, this week on Twitter I follow, and Instagram I follow Technic Ali. She was one of the presenters of Junior Mythbusters, and she does some amazing making. I mean, she's a young lady. I think she's only sort of 16, 17, something like that, possibly even less. I mean, she did fantastic work on Junior Mythbusters. She puts out some great work out there on kind of Instagram and YouTube. She's going to be a great advocate for sort of female makers and of a variety of skills. She's probably got a great future ahead of her in kind of sort of presenting Mythbusters of the future, if that ever gets sort of re-released. And this way I was really sort of saddened to see a tweet from her account basically saying, because of the horrible things that people have been saying and putting up on kind of particularly on Twitter, her account is now going to be kind of heavily moderated by an adult. And it really disappointed me to sort of see that happening. That young person. It doesn't matter that she's a woman. It's a young person who's still kind of sort of finding a way in the world. Who's subject to harassment and attacks, which are completely unnecessary. It just shows the kind of. I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter. It's not my favoured social media. I used to use it extensively. EduTwitter, it has some very good sides to it, but I find Twitter is so divergent in kind of there's some great stuff happening, but there's some really, really horrible stuff, worse than even Facebook.
Big time, yeah. You can be more kind of detached from it, can't you?
Yeah, I find that quite sad. But I think it's great that actually sort of we do have the outpourings of support that she received as a result of that from other people in the maker community, including sort of big names, people like sort of Billy Rubin and Ali from Geeky Fey Art. And you kind of it's nice to see that, but it shouldn't be necessary.
That's true.
Totally.
But it's great that there is that maker community that does offer so much support. I mean, all three of us I know kind of are involved in sort of Discords servers, and it's great, particularly on the smaller Discord. I mean, there's some of the Discord servers are huge, thousands of people, and community tends to get lost in that, I think. But certainly in the sort of smaller Discord servers, the community kind of is strengthened. Very supportive.
That being said, I think it's always like a case of like empty vessels make most sound. And it's usually a minority of like the whole subset of like the following that ends up being toxic. And unfortunately, they're the ones that stand out because obviously they're, mostly than the ones that if you're showing support someone, you don't feel, at least I don't feel the need to send a tweet every day saying, okay, I support your stuff, I love your work. For me that feels like going overboard. But if you're being toxic to someone, you're going to do it every day. So that's why I think sometimes it feels like there's a lot of negativity around a certain person or project or whatever. But then, as you said, you get the onslaught of like supportive messages, and like then you start sort of seeing like, okay, so maybe it's just one guy, maybe it's just a couple of guys or whatever it is. But unfortunately, those are the ones that show, and they end up giving a bad name to everyone else. So
And they tend to stick as well, don't they? The bad messages tend to really kind of, it's more difficult to shift those.
Yeah.
Sort of from yourself, it takes a lot more.
Yeah, one negative comment can hurt more than 100 good comments support.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I remember when I had a chat with Bob Claggett, he told us back then that he used, I don't know if he does it anymore, but he used to actively moderate his comments on YouTube. Whenever he saw like negative comments, he used to remove them because he said that, listen, I don't need this kind of negativity under my content, which is a fair comment to make. But nowadays I see sort of, he posts something on Facebook, even if it's like an old video which he reposts or whatever, I see like a bunch of negative comments, and I just skip over them nowadays. It's just, why bother? Why bother going through like negativity,
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing, is if you're actively moderating a large volume of that, you're actively exposing yourself to that.
Yeah.
And that's only going to be bad for you. It's easier to just skip across it and ignore it. And, or rely on, because I know that's something that Jimmy DeResta does as well. Sort of rely on the people who do support him to dive in instead. Dogpile them and
pin it to the top and let your supporters rip them apart. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's actually a very good thing, though. Wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to save some of your own energy, I suppose.
Yeah. Thankfully for myself, I don't think I've had any large number of negativity aimed towards me in my content. Though to be fair, my content doesn't usually get a lot of views anyway, so it's like small following. But I did have a video which I had to take down, because I just couldn't stand it anymore. Like about 3 or 4 years ago, I made an insect screen. I needed an insect screen for the bathroom window, so I made one. And for some unknown reason, that was the one that had the most views on my channel. For some reason, like thousands of views on it. So it was badly made, whatever, so I took it down. But there was some negativity on it. I don't know what was so interesting about insect screens, though.
Who knows with trolls? But talking of which, where can people find you, Kurt?
I was going to say the same, yeah.
Yes, I have a YouTube channel called Corso Workshop. I also have an Instagram by the same name, Corso Workshop, Facebook page, website, corsoworkshop.com, which I occasionally update with write-ups of my projects.
They'll all be in the video description.
Yep.
Stuff.
Several of them already are. I'll add the website. That's the one I need
Thank
to
you very
add.
much. Yeah. I mean, for those of you maybe who are not so familiar with me, I know it's a bit late in the stream to actually introduce myself in this way, but I upload content on making stuff, leatherworking, that sort of thing, as we said. But nowadays, due to other commitments that I have, I'm focusing mainly on a weekly live stream on a Sunday, where I make stuff, while having a chat with people who join in. So yeah, but videos will start coming back online soon, hopefully.
Well, I'm sorry to have dragged you over onto this live stream this evening, then, if we've detracted away from your
second one of the day.
As if I wouldn't miss this for the world. I've been pestering Andy all week.
Well, it's been great. It's been great chatting with you.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed that, and I look forward to it. Are you going to be able to come to Maker Central next year, do you think?
I can't see any reason why not, to be honest, but I have kind of learned to be a little bit cautious. So,
as we all, I think. Yeah.
I'd love to, though. I'd love to.
Brilliant. Well, hopefully we'll catch up and we'll have another drink in whatever bar that ends up being
I suspect we're going to get many people around a table for drinks at Maker Central next year.
Yes, definitely. Absolutely. And possibly even, never know, we might even do a live show.
I mean, that's a good
idea. Microphone in the middle, so you can shell out.
Yeah.
So everyone can sing. Or something.
Just sort of, drowned out by kind of the sound of just the bubble of a bar. Yes. Right. Well, next week we have our first American guest.
Got nothing but trouble next week.
Yes. Yeah. Mr. Andy Berkey is our guest next week. So yes, that could be. Yeah. Well, we'll have got to number 8. No, I'm going to have a bit of a chat with Andy this week because there's a few kind of areas I'd love to have a chat with him. And I'm hoping that we can kind of go down that line. because he's just such a fascinating chap. So I'm looking forward to having a chat with him next week. So yeah, that could be good.
I think it should. Be good.
Yeah. Right. On that note, everyone knows where to find Jemmy and myself.
All three of us now, the kids.
Yes, and Kurt obviously will. That information already is basic information is already in the show notes, and the more details and all the sort of mentions will get added over the next few days. Another long list of people. I try and keep a list of everyone and everything that's mentioned that could be kind of followed up on, and add that into the show notes. So they're quite extensive, I would say. So hopefully people find that useful. I know certainly last week with the several people mentioned how useful it was to be able to kind of follow up on particularly the kind of prosthetics links that were sort of mentioned, because I think that's something that kind of grabs people's attention if it's something that's kind of relevant, and so that's part of the service we provide. We will go there too. I would urge if people who are not subscribed on YouTube to please do that if possible. We're about 140 something subscribers at the moment, which is good going. It would be
44.
Yeah, it would be nice to. I think my physics channel is 150 something, so it'd be nice to kind of beat that, because there hasn't been a video on there for a few years. So I must sort of get back up on Physics Mad if anyone's interested. I think that's it. So
that's good for
time
tonight,
time to say goodbye. Yes, yeah. I'll go find out what happened with the football.
Week.
Yes.
Oh, was it football that was tonight?
Yeah, that's the one with the racket, isn't it? And the net in the middle. Yeah.
The little round bat and the tiny white ball.
Yes, with the little dimples all over it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, on that note, it's goodbye from me.
Good night, guys.